Nurse Tessa Madden was kneeling in the military hospital parking lot when the broken cook dragged him shouting soldiers to place a cracked dog tag in her paw. The handler called the dog useless. Lieutenant Val called him property. But Rook, the scarred Belgian Malinois, with one trembling back leg, ignored them all and pressed his muzzle against Tessa's old combat nurse patch, like he had finally found the only person left alive who understood. Upstairs, a wounded soldier named Eli Hi How on sedation screaming the same words stamped on the tag. Mir rocked on toward the SEAL trauma wing and began to howl without making a sound. What did Doc know, and why was everyone at the base suddenly terrified that Nurse Tessa had taken him home? Before this story unfolds, tell us where you are watching from. Drop your country name in the comments so this little community of brave hearts can see how far loyalty travels. And subscribe if you believe courage, hidden heroes, rescue dogs, and emotional justice still matter. The first lie Tessa Madden heard that morning was that the dog was already gone. Not dead, not officially gone. That was the word Lieutenant Nolan Vale used when he stepped into the trauma ward of Fort Bramley Medical Center, with two military police officers behind him and a folder tucked beneath his arm. He said it softly, as if softness could make it less cruel. The woman has been removed from the active roster. Vale told the charge nurse no further treatment will be required. Tessa stood at the supply cabinet with a roll of gauze in her hand, still wearing the navy blue scrubs she had worked in for the past 14 hours. She had learned during deployments and after them that officers who used clean words for ugly things were usually hiding the blood somewhere else. Remove where? She asked. Vale looked at her as if she were a misplaced chair. Nurse Madden, this does not concern civilian medical staff. I treated that dog's handler last night, Tessa. See, and I helped stabilize the dog in the ambulance bay before your men pulled him away. Vale's jaw tightened. He was young enough to still believe rank could carry him through every room, but old enough to have learned which truths to bury. His uniform was spotless. His eyes were not. The animal is unstable, he said. Aggressive, unfit for reassignment. He never bit anyone. He lunged at personnel. He lunged at the man trying to cut off his collar. One of the military police shifted his weight. Vale did not. Tessa knew the dog only by the name burned into a faded leather strap. Rook, Belgian Malinois, male, approximately 6 years old, 47 pounds, when he should have been closer to 60. Shrapnel scar along the ribs, torn paw paths, dehydration. Old fractures, one newer wound along the flank that had been closed too quickly by someone who either did not know what they were doing or did not care if infection set in later. But what she remembered most was not the blood. It was the silence. Most wounded dogs cried, snapped, panted, trembled, or fought. Rook had simply washed the hallways, as if counting exits, then pressed himself against a wounded soldier's stretcher and refused to move until Tessa touched his head. That wounded soldier was still upstairs in room Staff Sergeant Eli Hayes. He had arrived half-conscious just after midnight, his left side torn by blast trauma, his right hand clenched so tightly around a folded scrap of fabric that 3 people had failed loose. Tessa had cleaned dirt from his face and found old burns running under his collar like a map of a fire he had survived years ago. When she leaned close to check his pupils, he whispered a name she did not recognize. Rooks. The dog had answered by crawling, not walking, crawling across the ambulance bay floor through boot prints, saline, and blood. Turao Vale wanted the dog gone. The second lie came 20 minutes later. Tessa was in the med room pretending to inventory syringes when she heard the noise outside. It was not barking. It was the hard scrape of claws against concrete, followed by a soldier cursing. She moved before she thought. The rear exit opened onto a service lot where supply trucks reversed into loading bays and ambulances came when the front entrance was blocked. A gray transport truck idled near the curb. Two men were dragging Rook toward it with a catch pole and leash. The dog's back leg folded under him, but he did not yell. Blood darkened the bandage near his hip. His muzzle was strapped shut with a black restraint Tessa had not authorized. "Stop," she said. Nobody did stop. This time one of the MPs turned. "Mom, step back." Rook lifted his head. For 1 second his eyes met hers, and Tessa felt something old crack open behind her ribs. She had seen that look before. Not from him, from patients left behind in triage tents. When the helicopter had only 2 seats and 5 wounded men were begging God for air. From soldiers who did not ask to be saved, because they had already decided they were not worth the trouble. Rook's gaze said the same thing. "Not save me. Listen." Then he twisted. It should not have been possible. His body was too weak, his mouth bound, his leg barely holding. But he drove his shoulder into the MS scene, slipped the pole, and dragged himself toward Tessa with a desperate, uneven force that made everyone freeze. Vale appeared at the loading bay door. "Secure that animal." Rook reached Tessa and collapsed against her knees. Something from inside the mouth, from inside the muzzle. Not from inside the muzzle, from beneath the strap, where he must have hidden it between leather and jaw. A dog tag cracked down the middle. Tessa picked it up. Eli Hayes. Below the name was a blood-darkened engraving that made no sense. "Mission active." Vela stepped forward too weakly. His military property. Tessa closed her fingers around the tag. "It has a patient name on it. It has nothing to do with your patient. Then why is his dog carrying it?" Rook is not his dog. The dog's body shook against her legs, not from aggression, from exhaustion. His eyes did not leave Vale. A nurse from the second floor opened a window above the lot. Tessa, room Hansi crashing. Eli. Tessa shoved the dog tag into her scrub pocket and ran. By the time she reached room Airwet, alarms were already shrieking. Eli Hayes tossed against the bed rails. Monitors jumping, oxygen cannula torn loose. 2 nurses tried to hold him down, while Colonel Miriam Arden stood at the foot of the bed in full uniform, her face drawn tight. Eli's eyes were open but not present. "Don't bury the signal," he gasped. "Don't bury her twice." Tessa moved to the bedside. Eli, it's Nurse Tessa. "You're at Fort Bramley." He grabbed her wrist with shocking strength. "The dog found you?" Tessa went still. Colonel Arden's gaze snapped to her. Tessa lowered her voice. "Rook came to me." Ellis' grip tightened. Tears slipped from the corners of his eyes into his hairline. Then she knew, he whispered. "Who knew?" His gaze drifted toward the sealed trauma wing beyond the hallway. The one no longer used except for overflow, storage, and classified medical holes. His lips trembled. Tessa called for medication, checked his pupils, adjusted oxygen. Colonel Arden did not move. She looked less like a commander and more like a woman watching a door she had hoped would never open. After Ellie stabilized, Arden followed Tessa into the corridor. "What did the dog give you?" she asked. Tessa Her face blank. I don't know what you mean. Nurse Madden, you can ask Lieutenant Vale. He seems to know everything. Arden's expression hardened, but not with anger, with warning. You are a good nurse. You have a clean record here. Tessa, almost clean record. As if record showed all the ghosts. As if paper remembered names better than people did. Colonel, Tessa sighed. Are they going to put that dog down? Arden looked away. That was answer enough. Something inside Tessa made a decision before fear could talk her out of it. I'll take him. Arden's eyes returned to her. You cannot just take a military working dog, then discharge him to Tian. Simple temporary medical foster under civilian rehabilitation. Put whatever words you need on the form. You know he isn't dangerous. Rugg is attached to an open investigation. Then why is Vale trying to make him disappear? For a moment, the hallway seemed to lose sound. The alarms, footfalls, rolling carts, distant voices, all faded behind the question. Arden lowered her voice. Some missions do not end when the soldiers come home. Tessa felt the dog tag burning in her pocket. What mission? Arden did not answer. At the end of the hall, Lieutenant Vale stepped from the elevator. He looked from Arden to Tessa, then to room behind Tessa. From the service lot 2 floors below came a sound that lifted every hair on her arms. Not a bark, not a howl. A low, broken, voiceless cry from a dog who had been trained never to make noise in enemy territory. Ellie's monitor began to alarm again. And Tessa understood the first truth of the day. Rook had not run to her because he wanted her, because somebody else might still be waiting to be found. By nightfall, Tessa had signed 4 forms, ignored 6 warnings, and lied twice to get Rook into the back of her old blue truck. The first lie was easy. She wrote that she had adequate experience with trauma-reactive animals, which was only true if one counted wounded soldiers who flinched at slammed doors and refused to sleep facing windows. The second lie hurt more. On the discharge line where it asked why she accepted responsibility, she wrote temporary foster. There was nothing temporary about the way Rook looked at her when she opened the passenger door. He did not hop in. He waited. His body trembled with fatigue, but his eyes moved over the truck cab, the mirrors, the empty cup holder, the space behind the seats, evaluating, searching, making sure no one was hidden there. Only when Tessa said, "Clear," did he climb inside. The word had come to her without thought. Clear, military, old, buried. Rook settled on the passenger seat and placed his head against the window. His muzzle rest was gone now, replaced by a loose lead. His ears remained half-raised despite exhaustion, turning toward every engine, every crane, every clink of mass from the base parking lot. Lieutenant Vale stood beneath the yellow security light near the hospital entrance. He watched Tessa's truck roll past the gate with a look that promised this was not finished. Tessa did not look back. She lived 20 minutes from Fort Bramley, in a small rented house at the edge of an old farming road. The place had 1 bedroom, a narrow kitchen, worn floors, and a porch that sagged slightly on the left. She had chosen it because nobody visited without calling first, and because the nearest neighbor was far enough away that nobody complained when she woke screaming. She had not screamed in 11 months. She had counted. Rook refused to enter until she opened every door inside. Bathroom, bedroom, closet, laundry space, back porch. He followed behind her, limping, nose low. He sniffed the air beneath the sink, the corner by the water heater, the window latch above the bed. Then he stopped in front of the hallway wall where Tessa had hung nothing. No photographs, no certificates, no unit patch, no frame flag. Just blank paint covering the years she did not discuss. Rook stared at the wall. "What?" Tessa whispered. The dog lifted one paw and touched the paint. Tessa's mouth went dry. On the other side of that wall was the closet, where she kept a sealed plastic beyond. Inside were the things she had not thrown away and could not look at. A cracked field watch, a faded medic patch, a sand-stiffened scarf, and a folded map from a mission that had officially been labeled a training accident. Operation Night Glass. 4 years ago, Tessa had been a combat nurse, attached to a mobile surgical team near a border nobody on television could pronounce. The mission was supposed to be clean, evacuate wounded local informants, stabilize 2 injured American advisors, and get out before dawn. Instead, the convoy had split under fire. The radio had filled with wrong coordinates. The surgical truck had burned. Tessa had carried 3 men to safety and left one voice calling from behind a wall of smoke. She had never found out whose voice it was. The official debrief said no personnel were unaccounted for. That was the 3rd lie she remembered best. Rook scratched once at the wall. Tessa backed away. "No," the dog looked at her. "No," she said again, but softer. "Not tonight." His wounded flank rose and fell too fast. Nurse first, Tessa told herself. Gross later. She cleaned his bandage at the kitchen table. He did not like the antiseptic bottle. He did not like when she reached behind his collar. Though he allowed it after, she held still and waited for him to decide. "Goodbye," she murmured. His eyes flicked to hers. "Not a boy," they seemed to say, "a soldier." The wound beneath the bandage was worse than she expected. The stitches were uneven, placed over tissue that had not been cleaned properly. Dirt remained, there was bruising in the shape of fingers near his ribs. Tessa stopped breathing for a moment. Somebody had held him down hard, not to treat him, to take something. She checked the collar next. The leather was old, cracked in places, darkened by sweat and weather. No current identification tag remained, only a small metal plate stamped with Rook and a faded unit number. But the inner stitching was raised near the buckle. Tessa grabbed a seam ripper from her sewing kit. Rook's ears went up. "I'm not cutting the collar off," she said. "I'm checking something." He watched her hand, not afraid exactly. Measuring, she slid the seam ripper beneath one loose stitch and unopened a hidden fold in the leather. Something slipped out onto the table. A piece of waterproof paper no larger than 2 fingers. On it were 4 handwritten marks, a cross, a circle, the number Zesson, and a call sign, Lark. Tessa sat down slowly. Lark. She knew that call sign, not from Fort Brimley, not from Eli Hayes, not from any current roster, from Night Glass. During the fire, when radio channels collapsed into static and wrong coordinates, a female voice had broken through once, calmed a spike, gunfire. "Lark to Angel 2, hold the south wall. I have one alive." Angel 2 had been Tessa's evacuation code. She had answered, but the signal vanished. Later, command told her no one with the call sign Lark had been assigned to the mission. Later, they told her combat stress created false memories. Later, they told her to sign the report. Rook placed his nose on the paper and pushed it toward her. Her kitchen seemed to tilt. "Where did you get this?" The dog rose despite pain and limped toward the hallway wall again. This time he did not scratch. He stood facing it, shoulders trembling, as if waiting for Tessa to catch up to what he had known all along. With hands that felt distant from her body, Tessa opened the closet, dragged out the plastic bin, and snapped the lid free. The smell of dust and old smoke rose. Rook pushed past her and buried his nose in the contents. He ignored the scarf, the broken wash, the folded map. He stopped at the medic patch, Tessa's patch, the one she had worn during night class. Rook pressed his mouth against it and made that same terrible silent cry. Tessa's knees weakened. "You were there," she whispered. The dog closed his eyes. She unfolded the old map with shaking fingers and spread it across the floor. Rook stepped onto it, sniffing, then placed his paw on a grid square marked in Tessa handwriting from 4 years ago. South wall. Then he moved his paw to another mark. Evac Points. Tessa looked at the paper from his collar. The number, the cross, the circle, lark, outside, gravel shifted. Rook's head snapped toward the front window. Tessa froze. Headlights were off, but someone had stopped on the road beyond her porch. She saw only a dark shape near the mailbox. Then, a small red glow. A cigarette. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Unknown number. She answered without speaking. For several seconds there was only breath. Then Elias whispered, "Don't trust Val." Tessa gripped the phone. "Ellie, how are you calling me? He came to my room after you left." Alice's voice cracked with pain. "He asked what Rook gave you." Tessa looked at the front window. The cigarette glow disappeared. "What is Lark?" she asked. Eli made a sound between a laugh and a sob. "Not what?" he said. "Oh." The line crackled. Rook began to tremble. His stare fixed on the old map, on Eva's point cell, on the place Tessa had been ordered to abandon. Alice's voice dropped to a whisper. She was the nurse who stayed behind. Then the call died, and outside Tessa's house someone stepped onto her porch. Rook moved before Tessa heard the knock. He crossed the kitchen in 3 uneven strides and placed his body between her and the front door. His lips pulled back, but no growl came. That silence made him more frightening. A barking dog warns the world. Rook seemed to have been trained for moments when warning could get people killed. Tessa turned off the kitchen light. The house fell into darkness, broken only by the thin silver line of moon through the blinds. Another floorboard creaked on the porch. Then came a voice. "Nurse Madden, Lieutenant Vale." Tessa hand closed around the old map. Rook's body lowered ready. "I know you're inside." Vale called. "Open the door." Tessa slipped a waterproof paper into her pocket with Alice's cracked dog tag. She moved quietly to the wall beside the door, not in front of it. "What so you want to correct a mistake? You mean the one where you let me leave with the dog? The one where Colonel Arden allowed emotion to compromise protocol?" Ross's ears flattened at Vale's voice. Tessa noticed that, not fear. Recognition. "What did you do to him?" she asked. Vale sighed. "You are making this more dramatic than it need to be," says the man standing on my porch in the dark. "I need the collar." Tessa glanced at Rook. "There it is," she said. "You didn't come for the dog. I came for military property." Funny how everyone keeps calling evidence property. A pause. When Vale spoke again, the softness was gone. "You saw not understand what you are touching. Then explain it. I am trying to spare you from consequences." That word made something cold settle in Tessa's chest. Consequences had been the word used after night glass. Not failure, not cover-up. Consequences. There are consequences for refusing to sign. Nurse Madden. There are consequences for contradicting the report. There are consequences for letting guilt rewrite memory. Rook shifted his weight and pressed against her leg. He was shaking. Tessa looked down and saw blood spotting through the bandage near his hip. He had reopened the wound, moving so fast. Val knocked once hard. Open the door. Nah, 10 I will return with authorization. Bring a warrant. This is not a civilian matter. This is my house. And that is a government-owned animal. Tessa's voice sharpened. He is a living creature you were going to kill. She hid a piece of paper. Silence. Too long. Then Val said, you should ask yourself why a dog would carry a dead woman's call sign. Tessa's breath caught. Dead? He wanted the word to land. Toa closed the door before she opened it. Rook pressed harder against her. Who was she? Tessa asked. Val's answer came through the wood. Someone who made a choice. What choice? The wrong one? His footsteps moved away. Tessa waited until she heard a vehicle door close and tires retreat down the road before she slid to the floor. Rook remained standing until the sound vanished completely. Only then did he turn and limp back to her. She touched his face. You knew him. Rook's eyes did not blink. You knew Vale. The doc lowered his hand. Tessa did not sleep. She reinforced Rook's bandage, gave him water, then sat at the kitchen table with the map, the dog tag, and the waterproof paper arranged like pieces of a life someone had tried to scatter. At AM, her phone buzzed again. This time the number was blocked. She almost did not answer. Tessa Madden, said Colonel Arden. Tessa closed her eyes. Are you calling to tell me to return, Rook? I am calling because Eli has tried to leave the hospital. Tessa stood. Rook lifted his head. What? He tore out his IV and made it to the west stairwell before he collapsed. Why? He said. Rook was going back. Back where? Arden was quiet. Tessa gripped the phone. Colonel. The kitchen seemed to shrink around those words. Tessa looked at the map. What is evac? Point Sisua. A place that was cleared 4 years ago. No, it wasn't. I was there. Another silence. When Arden spoke again, her voice was different. Less command, more human. I know. Tessa sat down slowly. Of course Arden knew. Everyone in the chain knew something. That was how lies survived. Not because one person buried them, but because enough people agreed to walk carefully over the grave. Was Lark real? Tessa asked. Arden breathed out. Yes, the word did not feel like an answer. It felt like a wound reopening after years beneath a bandage. Tessa pressed her fingers to her eyes. What was her name? I can't tell you over the phone. Can't or won't. Tessa, listen carefully. If Val came to your house, he is worried. That means Rook has something they never recovered. The collar paper. Not just that. Tessa looked toward. He stood in the hallway, facing the front door again. Not because someone was there, because something inside him had decided it was time. What else could he have? Tessa asked. Memory. Tessa frowned. He's a doc. He's a trained detection crew who survived a mission where every human witness was either killed, discredited, or placed under control. Docs remember routes, scents, vial sites, burial sites. Tessa's stomach. Eternal, who was buried. Arden's voice dropped. The official report said no one. And the unofficial. I need to see what Rook does with the original night glass audio. Tessa looked sharply at the phone. You have it. I have fragments. Not enough to reopen anything. But if Rook reacts, if he confirms what? That the mission record was altered. Rook suddenly moved to the kitchen table and took the cracked dog tag gently between his teeth. He carried it to the front door, dropped it, then looked back at Tessa. She knew that look now. Listen. Arden continued. Bring him to the Old West training field at dawn, not the hospital. Too many eyes. Tessa, do not tell anyone else. Why should I trust you? The question came out tired, not angry. Arden had no quick answer. Finally, she said, because I signed the report too. Tessa felt her throat tighten. That's not a reason, no. Arden said, I confession. The call ended. Rook pushed the dog tag with his nose until it touched Tessa's boot. Elias, mission active. She bent and picked it up. Dawn was less than 3 hours away. The sensible part of her brain listed all the reasons not to go. Val, military jurisdiction, classified evidence, a wounded animal, a half-dead soldier. Her own aura had not like a landmine. But Rook was already standing by the door. Tessa saw his reopened wound, his trembling leg, his eyes full of the kind of loyalty humans praised only after it cost someone everything. You're going back whether I go or not, she said. His ears lifted. Tessa grabbed her keys, and in the bedroom closet, beneath the plastic bin she had left open, the old field watch began to beep. Once, twice. A dead battery waking after 4 years. The field watch should not have worked. Tessa stood in the closet doorway with her keys in one hand and the cracked dog tag in the other, listening to the small electronic beep coming from the plastic bin. Rook was behind her, body rigid, ears pointed forward. The watch lay beneath the folded scarf, its scratched face glowing faint green. Ramsey went dark. Tessa stared at it. Evac point rice color, houses tone. The watch, his was a word people used when they wanted permission to stop thinking. She picked up the watch. It was the same one she had worn during night class, until the strap snapped while she dragged a wounded man through gravel. She remembered losing it near the south wall. She remembered searching for it later among ashes when command allowed her 10 minutes to collect personal effects from the wrecked surgical truck. But now, holding it, she noticed something she had never noticed before. The backplate was not the same. It had been replaced. A thin seam ran beneath the manufacturer's logo. Tessa fetched a small screwdriver and pried carefully. The plate lifted with a click. Inside was a folded strip of microfilm sealed in plastic. Her pulse hammered so hard she heard it. Rook sat down beside her, not surprised, waiting. You brought this back, Tessa whispered. But that was impossible, unless someone had put it in her things after the mission. Unless Lark had. Tessa did not have equipment to read microfilm, but she held it to the closet light and saw tiny lines of text, coordinates, and what looked like initials. EHMND. NV. Her hand went cold. Elias, Madden, Tessa, Nolan Vale. He had been an intelligence liaison attached to the operation. One of the men behind the radios telling medical staff where to go, who to row, who to recover, who to ignore. Tessa remembered a voice through static. Angel 2, route north. South wall compromised. She had obeyed. And someone had still been alive at the south wall. AC dawn. Tessa drove toward the west training field, with Rook lying across the passenger seat, and the microfilm hidden inside her bra beneath her scrub top. She had called in sick to the hospital for the first time in 2 years. Her supervisor would be angry. Vel would be angrier. Let him be. The Old West training field had once been used for kiosks, vandaled cereals, and casualty evacuation simulations. Now the fences sagged and the wooden structures rotted beneath faded caution signs. Morning fog pooled over the grass. Colonel Arden waited beside a black SUV. She wore civilian clothes under a military coat, which somehow made her look more burdened, not less. Without the full armor of rank, Tessa could see the exhaustion around her eyes. Rook saw her and did not react aggressively. That mattered. Arden opened the rear of the SUV and pulled out a portable speaker, an old laptop, and a hard case marked with evidence seals. "You can," she said. You said Lark was real." Arden nodded. "She was Captain Maravin. Combat nurse. Attest to night class as field medical support." Tessa swallowed. Mara, a real name, changed everything. A call sign could be dismissed as radio confusion. A name had a mother somewhere. Might be a favorized song. Might be handwriting. Might be someone who laughed when tired and cursed when supplies ran out. Why wasn't she in the report? Because she was not supposed to be there. Tessa's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? Mara was assigned unofficially to recover a wounded informant who had evidence of weapons moving through our own contracted supply route. Night Glass was presented to most of the team as a medical evacuation. To a smaller group, it was evidence extraction. And to me, Arden looked at her. "You were used as cover." The words hit harder than Tessa expected. She had carried guilt for 4 years, believing she had misunderstood orders, missed a voice, failed to push hard enough. Now Arden was telling her she had been placed inside a lie before the first shot was fired. Rook limped toward the obstacle field. Arden watched him. He remembers this layout. We rebuilt sections from old night glass terrain for training before the mission. South wall, drainage ditch, radio, tower, vehicle shell. Tessa followed Rook through the fog. He sniffed the ground, then moved past the obstacles as if walking through another country. He paused at a low concrete barrier, touched it with his nose, then circled. His breathing changed. Arden opened the laptop. "I only have partial audio," she said. "Most of the file was overwritten by Vale." "I believe so." "Belief?" Arden's mouth tightened. "I can prove he assessed it. I cannot prove what he erased." Tessa turned. "You knew this and stayed quiet." "I challenged the report, and I was told reopening it would compromise active operations and endanger Persa." Let out a bitter laugh. "So you buried a nurse?" Arden flinched. "Good," Tessa thought. Flinch. Rook suddenly froze at the far end of the field. His nose lifted. His body pointed toward an old drainage culvert beyond. The fan pressed a key on the laptop here. Static burst from the speaker. Rook dropped low. The audio crackled, distorted by years and damage. "Angel 2, this is Lark. South wall, still holding. I have Hayes alive." Tessa's knees nearly failed. Her old call sign, Angel 2. Rook began to shake. Another voice cut through the recording. "Lark, destroy evidence package. Extraction denied." Tessa looked at Arden. "Tess, Vale." Arden nodded once. Mara's voice returned, breathing hard. "Negative. Evidence confirms internal compromise. I am moving. 2 point. I am moving. 2 point." Todd the speaker and pressed his forehead to it. Then came Tessa's own voice, younger, terrified, buried beneath static. "Lark, identify location. I can come south." Another voice. Vale again, sharper. "Angel 2, hold position. South wall is lost." Nara shouted over gunfire. "Do not listen to him. The recording cut out." Rook sprang up so fast his injured leg buckled. He scrambled toward the fence, dragging the leash from Tessa's hand. "Rook!" He squeezed through a gap beneath the chain link and ran limp toward the car. Tessa chased him, Arden behind her. The covert mouth was half hidden by weeds and rusted training debris. Rook disappeared inside. Tessa dropped to her knees. "Rook!" From the darkness came one sharp bark, the first sound she had ever heard him make. Arden's face went pale. "What?" Tessa demanded. Arden whispered. He was trained to bark only on human remains or live recovery. Tessa's blood chilled. Which one? A second bark echoed from inside, then a third. Rook emerged backward, pulling something in his teeth. Not bone, not cloth. A sealed waterproof pouch, blackened with age. Stamped across the front in faded white letters were 2 words. Night glass continuation. Arden reached for it. Rook growled. This time, loudly. Tessa took the pouch from him instead. He allowed it. Inside was a small recorder, a rusted key, and a patch Tessa recognized with a shock so deep it felt like falling. Her own medic insignia, but stitched beneath it, in tiny thread, were coordinates. Arden stared. Tessa looked from the patch to Rook. You weren't trying to bring me into the past, she whispered. Rook's eyes fixed on the road beyond the training field. A military vehicle had just stopped at the gate. Lieutenant Vale stepped out with 3 armed MPs and Lehigh. Hay was in the back seat, pale, wounded, and handcuffed. For several seconds, no one moved. Fog drifted between the old training obstacles. Rook stood beside Tessa with the waterproof pouch at her feet and blood darkening his bandage again. Colonel Arden faced the gate like a commander caught between the uniform she wore and the truth she owed. Lieutenant Vale closed the vehicle door with one gloved hand. Lehigh Hayes lifted his head in the back seat, even from 30 yards away. Tessa saw the terror on his face, not for himself, for Rook. Vale walked through the gate with the confidence of a man who had done this before and been believed every time. Step away from the animal, he said. Tessa picked up the pouch. Vale's eyes dropped to it. There it was, the smallest break in his expression. Not surprise, fear. You brought an injured patient here in restraints, Tessa shouted. Staff Sergeant Hayes is under protective custody. He needs a hospital. He needs to stop making unauthorized contact. Rook growled low. Vale looked at him. That doc should have been retired years ago. You mean killed. I mean content. Arden stepped forward. Lieutenant, on whose authority did you remove Hayes from medical care? Val did not salute her. That told Tessa more than his words did. Colonel Arden, you are no longer in the chain of control for this matter. Arden's face hardened. According to whom? Vale removed a document from his coat and held it up without handing it over. Special Operations Legal Review. Night glass materials remain classified under Connie Dusan. Fingers tightened around the pouch. Had not meant on the pouch. It had not meant ongoing. What is night glass continuation? She asked. Vale's gaze slid to her. A phrase you are not cleared to know. Eli suddenly slammed his shoulder against the inside of the vehicle. Don't give it to him. An MP turned. Vale raised one hand, and the man stopped. Sergeant Hayes, Valo called without looking back. You have already done enough damage. Alirai laughed, a broken, breathless sound. No, I survived. Tess, what scares you? Rook barked once. Ellie's eyes filled with tears. Hey, brother, he whispered. The dog lunged toward the vehicle, but his bad leg failed. Tessa caught his harness. His body shook with a desperation that made her chest ache. He had found Eli once, maybe more than once, and humans kept taking him away. Vale moved closer. Nurse Madden, you are in possession of classified material and an active duty military asset. Hand over both now, and I can still frame this as confusion caused by emotional distress. Tessa almost smiled. There it was again. Emotional distress? A woman hears a voice in a fire. Emotional distress? A nurse questions a missing report. Emotional distress? A dog carries evidence. Unstable animal. A wounded soldier remembers. Sedation confusion. Did you use that on Mara too? Tessa asked. Vale stopped. Arden looked sharply at her. Tessa saw the answer in both their faces. Mara had not just stayed behind. She had resisted. Captain Van disobeyed an extraction order. Vale said she refused to destroy evidence. Arden snapped. Vale's eyes flashed. She compromised a broader operation. She saved Hayes. Tessa sighed. Tessa, she created a liability. Rook lunged again, barking so hard the sound cracked. Tessa knelt and wrapped one arm around his chest. Easy, easy. But she was not talking to him alone. She was talking to herself. Because in Vale's language, every living witness was a lie-bug. Open the pouch, Elise shouted. Vale turned. Silence him. An MP reached into the vehicle. Rook tore free. Pain should have stopped him. The leash should have stopped him. Tessa's hands should have stopped him. Nothing did. He crossed the field in a blur of scars and fury, launched himself through the open rear window of the vehicle, and clamped his teeth not on a throat, not on a hand, but on the seat belt strap across Alice's chest. He pulled. Ellie twisted. Rook braced all four legs, including the bad one, and dragged the wounded soldier far each. Tessa ran. Tessa. Vale reached for his sidearm. Tessa saw the motion and screamed. No! The whole field froze for a heartbeat. Vale's hand rested on the holster. Rook stood half inside the vehicle, shielding Eli with his own body, and Colonel Arden drew her weapon on Vale. Remove your hand, Lieutenant. Vale's eyes narrowed. You don't know what's at stake. I know exactly what cowardice sounds like. Now, Colonel, I said remove your hand. Slowly, Vale obeyed. Tessa reached the vehicle and helped Eli out. He nearly collapsed against her, fever hot and shaking. His hospital gown showed beneath a hastily thrown jacket. A line of blood marked where his ivy had been ripped out. You idiot, Tessa whispered, supporting him. Eli gave a wee smile. Rook started it. The dog pressed against Elise's leg, whining now. Not silent, not trained, just wounded. Eli sank to the ground and buried his hand in Rook's neck. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm sorry, boy. I tried to come back. Rook leaned into him, eyes closed. For a moment the mystery disappeared and only grief remained. Then Ellie looked at Tessa. Openly. She now in the grass and removed the recorder from the waterproof pouch. It was an old military field recorder, scratched and sealed in plastic. The battery should have been dead, but when Tessa pressed the side button, a red light blinked once. The speaker crackled. Mara Van's voice emerged, faint but clear. This is recovered. Night glass was not extraction. It was containment. Evidence package confirms friendly contractor network selling Rus to hostile forces. Lieutenant Nolan Vale ordered at destruction of medical witnesses and assets. Repeat, Nurse Madden was given false coordinates. Tessa stopped breathing. Her name, Mara's voice, broke beneath distant gunfire. IFI, zone not reach, points as. Rook knows the continuation path. Mission does not end until the network is exposed. Zone not trust anyone who tries to bury the dog. The recording filled with static. Then came another sound, a baby crying. Tessa looked up. Eli closed his eyes. Arden whispered, No. Vale's face had gone colorless. On the recorder, Mara spoke again. Voice softer, urgent. Civilian. Survivor. Located. Female infants. I am diverting from Hayes will mark the route. Will remember. There was a child Ely nodded, tears running down his face. Mara found her in the clinic ruins. She won't leave her. Where is she? Ely looked toward the old culvert, then beyond it, toward the tree line behind Fort Bramley. That's what Rook has been trying to tell them for 4 years, he said. The mission never ended because the child disappeared into the same network Vale was protecting. Tessa felt the ground shift beneath her world. This was no longer only about a dead nurse, no longer only about a falsified report. Somewhere, a child saved from night glass had become evidence powerful enough for man to erase soldiers, silence a dog, and bury a mission under official language. Vela stepped backward. Arden turned her weapon toward him again. Lieutenant Nolan Vale, you are relieved pending investigation. Vela's fear vanished behind something colder. You still think this is about me? He said. Then his phone rang. He answered, listened, and smiled. Across the base, siren began to rise. Not ambulance sirens. Security lockdown. Val looked at Tessa. You opened the power, he said. Now the continuation protocol opens too. Behind them, Rook lifted his head toward the tree line and began to bark like someone out there had finally answered. The West training field transformed in minutes. Floodlights snapped on along the distant fence. Loudspeakers crackled from the direction of the main base road. A lockdown order rolled over Fort Bramley in clipped, emotional tones. All personnel shelter in place. Security breach protocol. Gate sealed. Tessa had her similar announcement before in combat zones when incoming fire turned hospitals into targets. But this was worse. On deployment, danger came from outside the wire. Here, it was inside the system, wearing badges and carrying paperwork. Vel lowered his phone. You should have let the dog disappear. Arden kept her weapon trained on him. Who initiated lockdown? Vale did not answer. Ely sagged against the vehicle, one arm wrapped around Rook. His lips had gone pale. Tessa put 2 fingers to his neck. Too fast? He needs fluids and antibiotics, she said. Eli grabbed her wrist. No hospital. You're septic. No hospital, he repeated. He will sabotage. Rook whined, licking Alice's hand. Tessa looked at Arden. Can you stop the lockdown? Arden's face was grim. Not from here, not from here. My clearance may already be suspended. Vale smiled faintly. Tessa hated him for that smile more than for the threats. It was the smile of a man who believed systems mattered more than truth because systems could be bent by the people who understood them. The recorder lay in the grass where Tessa had dropped it. She snatched it up and shoved it into her pocket. Where does Rook want to go? She asked Eli. Alice's gaze shifted toward the tree line beyond the culvert. Old quarantine canals. Arden frowned. Those were demolished. That's what the map says. Underground section remained. Medical animal isolation during outbreaks. Nightglass continuation used it as dead storage. Tessa's stomach tightened. Tiles. Equipment. Witness transfers. Eli swallowed hard. Maybe people. Rook stood, ignoring his pain, and faced the trees. Val's expression changed, just slightly. That was enough. Tessa saw it. Arden saw it too. Why would the dog lead us there? Tessa asked. Eli looked at Rook with grief, because it was the last place Mara told him to guard. The sirens grew louder. Arden made a decision. We move now? Vale laughed once. You are going to run through a lockdown base with stolen classified evidence, an injured crew, and a patient who can barely stand. Arden stepped close and removed Vale's sidearm from its holster. No, there's a We are going to escort a hostile intelligence officer. to the place he is terrified of. For the first time, Vel looked truly angry. You have no idea what you'll trigger. Arden leaned in. Then walk carefully. They moved through the gap behind the culvert into a strip of trees that separated the training field from older base property. Rook led despite his injuries, stopping every few yards to scent the ground. Ailey leaned on Tessa, each step dragging a breath of pain from him. Arden followed with Vel in front of her, his hands zip-tied with medical restraints from Tessa's emergency kit. The woods were not thick, but they felt separate from the base, like a place time had stopped maintaining. Rusted signs leaned under vines. Concrete foundations appeared and vanished beneath weeds. The air smelled of damp earth, pine, and something metallic Tessa could not name. As they walked, Eli spoke in fragments. Night class had not ended after the failed extraction. The official mission closed, but a shadow protocol continued under the excuse of protecting compromised routes, and when witnesses Mara Hash discovered that some of the people being protected were actually being transferred off record, names removed, medical charts altered, survivors relabeled as enemy assets or deceased civilians, the infant Mara Sieve had not been evidence because she was a child. She was evidence because of what had been found with her. A bracelet bearing the emblem of a contractor family tied to the supply network. Proof that the same men selling routes had allowed civilian dependents near the black site they later claimed did not exist. Mara called her June. Eli seed. Tessa glanced. No. Mara said nobody should be nameless twice. It was June on the calendar. His voice broke. Rook slowed and looked back at him. I carried the evidence package. Eli continued. Mara carried the baby. Rook tracked the safe path. We reached Point Siwa, but extraction never came. Vel's team came instead. Tessa felt cold all over. How was there? Ailey nodded toward Vel's back. Ask him what he did when Mara refused to hand over the child. Vel said nothing. Arden pushed him forward. The trees opened onto a sunken concrete yard, surrounded by old fencing. At first, Tessa saw only weeds and collapsed roofing. Then Rook descended a hidden ramp half covered by brush. At the bottom stood a steel door, no handle, only a keypad blackened with age. Rook pressed his nose to the lower seam and barked once. Tessa examined the keypad. Power's dead. Arden moved beside her. Might be not. She scraped grime from a small panel. A red light blinked weakly. Vel in-house? Tessa looked at him. Coat? He smiled. Go to hell? Eli whispered. Wait, Siwa. Entered it. Nothing. Rook pawed at her leg. What? He turned and pressed his nose to the cracked dot hair hanging from Tessa's fingers. Eli highest. Tessa understood. She typed the service number from the tag. The keypad flashed yellow. Then she added, Arsil. Vel lunged backward into Arden, trying to knock her down. Rook spun, but Eli shouted, What? The dog stopped at once, positioning himself between Vel and the door. Training over instinct. Mission over rage. Arden slammed Vel against the concrete wall and held him there. The door opened inward with a groan. Cold air breathed out, and from somewhere below came a sound that made Tessa's throat close. Not machinery, not alarms. A woman's voice, recorded and repeating through a failing speaker. Rook, hold. Angel 2 will come. Tessa stepped into the dark. The underground canal corridor smelled of dust, rust, and old disinfectant. Emergency lights pulsed dimly along the floor. Metal cages lined the walls, most empty, some containing rotted blankets and yellowed labels. Rook walked slowly now, not searching, remembering. At the end of the corridor was a medical isolation room. The door had been sealed with a chain that someone had cut years ago. Inside, Tessa found a cot, a cracked baby bottle, a field medical kit, and writing scratched into the wall with something sharp. Mara Van Haley Alzira. Rupno Rise Smaller. June transferred east. Mission never ended. Tessa tossed the words with trembling fingers. For 4 years, she had carried the guilt of abandoning a stranger. But Mara had known her name, had trusted her, had left a message for her. Angel 2 will come. Tessa covered her mouth. Behind her, Arden whispered, "My go." Ellie slid down the wall, crying openly now. Rook went to him and placed his head in his lap. Tessa turned to Vale. "You knew this room existed." Vale's face was unreadable. 10. From the far end of the corridor, a radio, mounted on the wall, crackled to life. A voice spoke through static. "Continuation site accessed. Recover all assets. No survivors required." Arden looked at Tessa. The base had not admitted the mission never ended. Not yet. But the mission had just admitted it was still hunting them. The first shot hit the steel door behind them. Everyone dropped. The sound in the underground corridor was enormous. A violent crack had rolled through the old kennels and startled dust from the ceiling. Rook did not bark. He moved. He shoved his body against Eli, forcing the wounded soldier lower, then turned toward the entrance, with his ears flat and teeth bared. Tessa crawled across broken tile and grabbed the medical kit from Mara's isolation room. Her hands knew what to do even while her mind tried to splinter. Tourniquet, gauze, tape, anything useful. Arden dragged Vale behind a concrete support pillar and took cover beside him. "Who is coming?" she demanded. Vale's breathing had changed. He was afraid, too. "That protocol is automated," he said. Once the pouch opened and the site was accessed, alert went to external security contractors. "Your network, not mine anymore." Another shot struck the outer door frame. Tessa looked at Eli. "Can you move?" He tried to stand and nearly blacked out. "Has an arm," she said. Eli gave a faint, pain grin. "Always liked honest nurses." Rook nudged Tessa elbow, then moved to the far wall of Mara's room. He scratched at the lower corner beneath the writing. Tessa stared. "What is it?" The dog scratched. Again, more urgently. Arden fired once toward the entrance. "Madden, whatever he's showing you, now would be the time." Tessa ran her hands along the wall. The concrete sounded hollow near the base. She found a metal edge hidden beneath dust and pulled. A small panel came loose, revealing a narrow maintenance crawl space barely wide enough for a person and a dog. Eli laughed weakly. Mara left backup exits. Tessa helped Eli toward the opening. He gasped with every movement. Blood had begun to seep through the dressing at his side. "Go," Arden ordered. "What about you?" Tessa asked. Arden, delay them." "No." Arden's eyes flashed. That was not a suggestion. "They'll one stop if you run. They need the recorder, the dog, and Hayes." Tessa turned. "And me." Valo met her eyes. "You were supposed to remain discredited. Now you're evidence too." The words should have frightened her. Instead, they burned away something. For 4 years, Tessa had lived quietly because command had taught her that her memory was dangerous. She had kept her walls blank, her voice careful, her past folded in a bin. She had mistaken survival for peace, but peace built on silence was just another kind of prison. She crawled into the maintenance passage first, pulling Eli after her. Rook followed, then stopped and looked back at Arden. "Go," Arden said to him. Rook did not move. Elizabeth, he won't leave a handler behind. Arden's face chanced. For a commander who had signed the report, there could be no crueler mercy than a dog still believing she deserved guarding. She grabbed Vale and shoved him toward the passage. "Move." He hesitated. Rook growled. Vale moved. They crawled through darkness while gunfire echoed behind them. The passage sloped downward and curved. Tessa felt concrete scrape her elbows. Ellis' breath grew wetter. She kept one hand on his wrist, counting pulse beats in the dark. "Stay with me," she whispered, trying. "Try harder." He sniffed the air, then pushed his shoulder against the rusty grate. It resisted. Arden crawled up behind them, breathing hard. "Move aside." Together, Tessa and Arden kicked the grate until it broke free. They emerged into a drainage tunnel beneath the old base perimeter. Thin daylight showed at the far end, but between them and the exit stood a locked chain-link barrier. Vale looked at it and laughed under his breath. Tessa rounded on him. "Key." He shook his head. "Mara had it." Tessa remembered the waterproof pouch, the rusted key. She dug it from her pocket with shaking hands. It fit the lock. The barrier opened. They stumbled out beyond the official fence line into a dry creek bed overgrown with brush. The base sirens were muffled now, but helicopters thudded somewhere in the distance. Arden grabbed her phone. "No service." "Tell them nearby signals," she said. Tessa looked around. "We need to get Eli to a hospital not controlled by the base." Eli shook his head. "No task first. Broadcast what?" "The recorder." "The room? Mara's wall?" "Val's confession if we can get one." He looked at Arden. "You know where?" Arden hesitated. "Val sighed on." Tessa turned. "Where?" Arden looked toward the low ridge east of the creek bed. "Old emergency communications tower. Analog backup. Decommission but not dismantle." Eli closed his eyes in relief. Mara's route. Rook was already facing east. The climb nearly killed Eli. They moved through scrub and broken service roads, staying low when vehicles passed beyond the fence. Tessa tore strips from her scrap jacket to reinforce Alice's bandage. Arden carried most of his weight when he weakened. Rook, limping badly now, doubled back again and again, checking the trail, nudging Eli, guiding them around exposed ground. Vale walked because Arden kept her stolen sidearm pressed into his back. At the base of the ridge, Tessa finally stopped. Rook's bandage was soaked. His back leg trembled uncontrollably. "You can't keep going," she told him. Rook looked at her, then at the ridge. "I know," she whispered. "Mission." She hated the word in that moment. Humans used mission to ask animals and soldiers to spend themselves completely, then called them broken when they had nothing left to give. She knelt and pressed her forehead to his. "You are more than what they trained you to do." Rook held still. "Then," Eli said softly, he nodded. At the top of the ridge stood the old communications tower, a skeletal metal structure beside a concrete shed. The door was locked, but the rusted key opened it too. Inside, dust-covered radio consoles, backup batteries, and a landline emergency transmitter. Arden moved quickly, flipping switches. Nothing happened. Val watched from the corner. Power was cut years ago. Rook sniffed beneath the console and pawed at a loose cable. Tessa crouched. "Generator line." Arden traced it. "Manual crank battery." For 10 brutal minutes, they worked the old crank until lights flickered across the board. Eli sank into a chair. Tessa checked him again and felt fear sharpen inside her. His fever was climbing. His pulse was thready. "Hurry," she said. Arden connected the recorder to the input jack with a cable found in a drawer. Static filled the room, then Mara's voice went out over the emergency band. His is recovered. Night glass was not extraction. It was containment. Tessa stood beside Rook as the truth entered the air. Not a file in a drawer, not a sealed report, a voice, Mara's voice. Eli cried silently. Arden lowered her head. Even Vale looked away. When the recording reached, Angel too was given false coordinates. Tessa felt something inside her finally loosen, not heal, not fully, but loosen enough for breath. Then she grabbed the microphone. My name is Tessa Madden, she said, voice shaking but clear. Former combat nurse, call sign Angel 2. I am with Staff Sergeant Eli Hayes, Colonel Miriam Arden, and Rook. We have evidence that Operation Nightglass was falsified and that continuation orders are still active. A military nurse named Mara then saved a child and was erased. We are requesting independent command review, medical evacuation, and protection for all witnesses. Arden's eyes widened. Tessa kept going. And to whoever is listening inside Fort Bramley, they told us the mission ended because they needed us to stop looking. They lied. For a moment, only static answered. Then voices began breaking through. Base security, civilian emergency operators, military pole, try, overlapping orders. Someone from regional command demanding identification. Someone else asking for the recording again. The lay had cracked open. Outside the shed, a helicopter swept low over the ridge. Vale smiled sadly. You think truth saves you immediately, he said. I done. Brow. Tessa turned toward the window. As the tree line below, armed figures were climbing toward the tower. And the radio, still open, carried a new voice from Fort Bramley Medical Center. This is room, heard a young nurse say. The whole word heard. Colonel, the base commander is asking one question. Arden grabbed the microphone. What question? The nurse's voice shook. He wants to know why the system still lists Nightglass continuation as active today. The admission did not come as an apology. It came as confusion. That was what made it real. Lies carefully maintained for years rarely collapsed because guilty men confessed with bowed heads. They collapsed when ordinary people, following ordinary procedures, found something impossible in the system and said it out loud. Nightglass continuation, active, not sealed, not closed, active. The word moved through Fort Bramley far than others could contain it. The trauma ward heard it first over the emergency relay. 10 Base Security heard Regional Command ask why a 4-year-old medical evacuation had current funding costs. Then the records office found patient transfer numbers still addressed to redacted names. 10 Someone in the coup unit pulled Rook's file and discovered that the dog had been marked deceased twice, reinstated for disposal under A. By the time the armed contractors reached the ridge, they were no longer entering silence. They were entering witnesses. Arden stood in the doorway of the communications shed with her weapon raised. Tessa stayed beside Eli, one hand pressed against his bandage. Rook stood in front of them all, swaying but unbowed. The figures below spread out. Vale shouted through the open door. Stand down. Regional Command has the broadcast. One of the men paused. Another lifted his rifle anyway. Rook launched himself forward, not down the hill at Vale. He struck Vale behind the knees, knocking him hard to the floor, just as the shot cracked through the doorway where Val's head had been. Tessa screamed. Arden returned fire into the dirt near the attackers, forcing them behind trees. Vale stared the bullet hole in the wall, then at Rook. The dog has saved him. That seemed to break something in him that fear had not. Why? Val whispered. Rook stood over him, teeth bared, eyes blazing with pain and duty. Eli coughed. Because Mara trained him to guard the living. Even the ones who don't deserve it. Vale's faced it. Outside, a speaker thundered from the helicopter. Drop weapons. Federal Military Command has assumed control. Drop weapons. 10 one by one. They lowered their rifles. It was not over. Not truly. Tessa knew enough about institutions to know truth, Diana. Thus, because the radio carried it there, there would be hearings, denials, sealed testimonies, men claiming he had only followed protocols written by others. But the killing part was over. For now, medical evacuation arrived 12 minutes later. Tessa refused to release Ellie's hand down until he was loaded into the helicopter. He was barely conscious, but when Rook tried to climb after him, a medic blocked. Tessa's eyes went cold. Arden stepped beside her. Hatku is a decorated witness in an active command investigation, and the only reason half of us are alive. The medic moved. Rook climbed in and collapsed beside. As the helicopter lifted, Tessa looked down at Fort Bramley. The base seemed smaller. From above, buildings, roads, fences, fields, so many places for truth to hide. When people decided not to look, Asa Regional Military Hospital. Ellie went straight into surgery. Rook went into veterinary trauma care. Tessa was taken to a conference room where officials asked questions for 6 hours while she still had Rook's blood on her sleeves. They asked about the dog tag, the pouch, the recorder, the underground kennel, the writing on the wall. They asked when she first suspected falsification. She answered each question until her voice grew raw. Then a general she had never met asked, "Why did you take the dog home?" Nurse Madden. Tessa looked at the long table of uniforms, legal advisors, investigators, and silent recorders. Because everyone else kept calling him broken, she said. And broken creatures still know where the bodies are buried. No one spoke for a moment after that. 2 days later, Fort Bramley issued the statement. It was brief, carefully worded, cowardly in places, but one sentence changed everything. Operation Nightglass continuation remained active. After the declare closer date and prior records require immediate review. The base admitter ended. For Tessa, the admission did not bring the relief she expected. It brought grief with a name. Captain Mara Van. Her file was restored first. Combat nurse. Call sign Lark. Missing. Presumed dead. Recommendation for posthumous valor review. Evidence pending. Tessa read the file. Alone in a hospital. Chapel. AEM. Her hands shook over the page, listing Mara's last known actions. Recovered wounded American personnel. Protected military working dog. Preserved evidence. Rendered A295 civilian infant. Refused unlawful destruction. Cried the paper to her chest and cried for a woman she had never met but had somehow been walking beside for 4 years. When he woke, Rook was there, shaved in 3 places, stitched, splinted, wearing a cone he despised with quiet dignity. Tessa sat beside them both, exhausted beyond language. Ellie opened one eye. Did we win? Tessa smiled faintly. Define win. Eyes. Rook still fired. He has been upgraded from unstable asset to protected evidence. Ely groaned. He'll hate the paperwork. Rook thumped his tail once. Then Ellie's smile faded. June. Tessa had been waiting for the question. The investigation had found transfer loss in the underground site. Oh, but recoverable. A child moved east under a medical protection code, then a foster identity, then sealed relocation. Alive. That was all they knew. Alive. Tessa took Ellie's hand. They found a trail. His eyes filled. Mara saved her. Yes. Rook lifted his head. Tessa looked at him, and Rook remembered weeks past. Veil talk, not of sudden goodness. Arden sighed, but because men like him love survival more than loyalty. He gave names, routes, storage sites, payment chains. He claimed he had believed continuation protected national security. He claimed Mara's refusal forced impossible choices. He claimed the dog had complicated everything. Tessa did not attend his first hearing. She had no interest in watching a man dress cowardice in official language. Instead, she went back to Fort Bramley with Arden, Eli, and Rook. The underground kennel had been secured as an evidence site. Mara's scratched message remained untouched behind protective glass. Tessa stood before it for a long time. Anjo, to us, lied Tom Titurna. She had hated that sentence at first. Now she understood it as a gift. Mara had not written. Angel 2 failed. She had written. Angel 2 was lied to. There was a difference big enough to live and stood beside her. Arden stood beside her. He should have fought her on the colonel's seat. Tessa looked at her. ACS. Arden nodded, accepting the wound. Then Tessa added, fight harder now. I will. Rook moved them to the corner of the room where the cracked baby bottle had been found. He sniffed the floor, then lay down with his head on his paws. Ellie leaned on a cane, watching him. Hale waited here Eli's seat. After Mara sent me through the drainage route, she told him to hold until Angel 2 came. I heard her. I thought he died here. Tessa knelt beside Rook for years. The dog had been recovered later, starved, wounded, half feral, near the old route. Instead of listening to what he guarded, they labeled him unstable. Instead of following where he pulled, they restrained him. Twice his file had marked him dead. Twice someone had brought him back into use, because even broken, he was too valuable to discard. He had carried the mission alone in the only ways he could: scent, memory, loyalty. Tessa rested her hand on his scarred shoulder. You can stand down now, she whispered. Rook looked at her. For the first time since she had met him, his eyes did not ask her to listen. They asked whether he was allowed to rest. Tessa's throat closed. Yes, she said. You're home. 3 months later, the girl named June was found. Her legal name was different now. She was 4 years old, living with an adoptive family who had no idea the quiet gaps in her early records were tied to a classified mission. Her parents loved her fiercely and refused cameras, interviews, and military ceremony. Tessa respected them for that. There was no dramatic reunion in a crowded hall. No child running into the arms of strangers she could not remember. Instead, there was a protected meeting in a garden behind a civilian family services building. June arrived holding her mother's hand, wearing yellow shoes and a denim jacket with embroidered flowers. She had dark curls, serious eyes, and a stuffed dog tucked beneath her arm. Tessa stood back with Eli, Arden, and Rook. No one told June the whole story. Not yet, not for years. Childhood deserved gentleness, where adults had failed. Her mother knelt and whispered something to her. June looked at Rook. The old dog went still. Then the little girl walked toward him. Tessa held her breath. Rook lowered himself carefully to the grass, making his body small despite his scars. June stopped in front of him and studied his face with the solemn wisdom of children who sense more than they understand. "Doggy hurt?" she asked. Tessa wiped her eyes. June's mother said softly, "But he got better." June placed her stuffed dog beside Rook's paw. "For him," she said. Rook sniffed the toy, then touched his nose gently to June's hand. Ailey turned away, crying. Arden stood like a statue, tears running silently down her cheeks. Tessa thought of Mara Van carrying a nameless baby through smoke, choosing life over orders, trusting a dog and a nurse he had never met to finish what she could not. June giggled when Rook's whiskers tickled her palm. That small sound did what official statements could not. It proved the mission had not ended in fire. It had ended here, in sunlight, with a child alive, and a broken doll, finally allowed to be gentle. Later, when they returned to Tessa's house, Rook climbed the porch steps slowly. His leg would never fully heal. His nightmares still came some nights. So did Tessa's. Sometimes, at a.m., they met in the hallway without either one making a sound. She would sit on the floor. He would lean against her. He would lean against her. Together, they would wait for the past to pass through without taking them with it. Tessa finally hung something on her blank wall. Not medals, not certificates, a framed copy of Mara's restored patch. Beside it, Rook's cracked leather collar, and beneath them, the dog tag that had started everything. Eli Hayes, mission active. One evening, Eli visited with his cane and a bag of contraband cheeseburgers for himself and absolutely not for the dog. Fries for Rook. Arden came too, carrying the tired look of someone still fighting hearings and sealed rooms. They sat on Tessa's porch while the sun dropped behind the fields. Eli scratched Rook behind the ears. "You know, technically, he took you home." Tessa looked down at the dog sleeping with his head across her boot. "Yeah," she said. "I think he did." Arden gazed toward the road. "The review board wants your statement next month." Tessa sighed. "They already have it. They want it cleaner." Eli snorted. "Cleaner" means irritated to ignore. Tessa watched Rook's chest rise and fall. For years, she had believed strength meant enduring quietly. Now she knew silence was sometimes the last cage left standing. "They can have the truth," she said. "It won't be clean." Rook opened one eye as if approving. In the distance, Fort Bramley's Evan Bugle drifted over the fields. Once that sound had made Tessa's stomach tourist. Now it reminded her that institutions were made of people, and people could fail, confess, fight, return, and choose again. The mission had never ended because the truth had not been allowed to arrive. But now it had names: Mara, Eli, June, Tessa, Rook. And when the old dog finally slept without flinching, Tessa understood that rescue had never meant saving. Only him. Rook had brought home the mission, and somehow, in the wreckage, he had brought Tessa home too. Some heroes never ask for medals. Some only leave paw prints, scars, and the truth no one else was brave enough to carry. Nurse Tessa thought she was rescuing a broken queue, but Rook was rescuing everyone the mission had erased. If this story moved you, share your country in the comments and subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice.